record. Pashas B'chukosai. Schusel learning today is when somebody's having open heart surgery. Yeshua may have been Sora Rachel before Shlema. The learning now till the end of the day. Imchuksai Telechu. That's Mitzvosai Tishmu Vasisamosam. If you walk in my statutes, it's plural. If you walk in my statutes, and there's mitzvosai tishmru, and you observe my mitzvahs, vasisamosam, meaning you retain them, and you actualize them, you do them. Chok always is something which is not a rational law. It's something we wouldn't have come upon ourselves, as Rashi always explains, the name of Chazal. And it's in bechuki telechu. Singular. What's chukosai? Chuki singular, chukosai is plural. These questions are asked by the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. And what's telechu? In bechukosai telech. Each one of us. What's the telechu? Let's see Rashi. Yochel zekima mitzos. Maybe chukosai is referring to the fulfillment of the mitzvos. Shomer ves mitzvosai tishmru. But since the pasuk continues, and my mitzvos you should observe, you should fulfill. Mitzvos omor. So mitzvos are addressed a few words later. Homani mekayim es chukosai telechu. So what does the Torah refer to when it says you should walk in my statutes? Shetu amelim b'Torah. You should toil. The chok is the toiling of the Torah. If you toil in my Torah, it's not enough just to study the Torah. You have to achieve a level of toiling, and as a result of that, you observe my mitzvos, you retain my mitzvos. So the retention is based on the initiative, which is toiling, vasisamosam, and you will fulfill them. Let's see Rashi. It's mitzvos like tishmru. Have a mela b'Torah, amanas lishmor ulakayim. Meaning, when you originally toiled, the initial toiling is for the sake of retention. Lishmor is retention. Ulakayim. Retaining the information, understanding it, internalizing it. Ulakayim, and fulfilling it. Shenemar limartem osam. You should study them. Ushmartem lasosam. And if you study them, then you're going to retain it to do them. The Gemara tells us in Kedushin, Godla Talmud, great is the study of Torah, more than anything else. Talmud mevili maseh. When you study something, it brings to actualization. Meaning, when you study something, just abstract knowledge for intellectual acquisition, you will not come upon its value unless initially you study it with the intent to actually retain it and to fulfill it. You read about a vacation location, a vacation place. You study a certain subject and it touches a certain way, you pursue that subject matter. Torah is different. Torah, as we'll discuss in a moment, has something innate in it, because Torah is a spiritual pursuit. We are physical beings. The information is spiritual information, as we'll discuss in a minute. Even though torts, contracts, whatever they are what they are because it's directly a representation of the spiritual. I guess last week, if Eda Brochachal Ela Doasom Minayin, as we explained it, Bracha only comes upon something which is concealed from the eye. It hasn't been quantified. And as the Maral explained, that once something is quantified, it has relevance to the finite. Finite is the physical, and the concept of Bracha is spiritual. And once it's quantified, since it's taken on a profile of physical, it no longer has relevance to bracha. So once you bring in your harvest and you quantify whatever the harvest is, it's 1,000 bushels, 100 bushels, and then you say the tefillah that Hashem should bring bracha on your harvest. The Gemara says it's a tefillah shov, it's a tefillah in vain, because once you've quantified it, you've given it that physical profile. It has no, because bracha is spiritual. Bracha is unlimited. The spiritual realm is unlimited. So we ask the question, the building of the Mishkan, in terms of its specifications, are so precise that if it's not made and built as specified, it's not a valid Mishkan. The Mizbeach is not valid. The Shulchan is not valid. The menorah is not valid. And here, it's the location of the Shekhinah. I mean, the Shekhinah, God's presence is infinite. But yet Hashem says, make for me this sanctuary, and I will dwell in it. So here we have something precise to the nth degree. And Hashem says, that will be my abode. I will dwell there. That will be the link between us. That will be the medium between us and you, me and you. But if as we just explained, something spiritual cannot have relevance, something which has been quantified. It's being so precise. And all bracha emanates from the Mishkan. How do we understand it? I don't recall if we asked the question last week. So what I said was, in the past, Alan's on, he probably would quote me verbatim, that all the various vessels in the Mishkan, its dimension, these are only symbolisms of the spiritual. The Mizbeach has to be made of copper, has to be made, have a certain shape. Whatever it is, that's to activate spiritual forces, because that itself has a certain representation in the spiritual realm. A bushel of wheat is a bushel of wheat. Whatever way you cut it, process it, that's what it is. Something in the physical is physical. The Mishkan is only symbolism representing, it represents the infinite. So when we have the Mishkan, whether it's the Shulchan, whether it's the Mizbeach, whether it's the Menorah, whatever it is, we understand what it is on the most superficial level. But why it has to be that way? Because Hashem said it has to be that way, for no other reason. Because only within that context does it activate forces, because that has relevance to the spiritual realm, which is unlimited. Therefore, the Shekhinah dwells in that location. And what alludes to that, as we discussed, there were 13 materials in the Mishkan. 13 is Echot. It just alludes that this location, with all its specifications and all its dimensions, it's only that because it has to have relevance to the Echot, which is Hashem, which is the infinite. That's the concept. When we study the Mishnah in Bava Kama, Shor Shelo Gechesaporo, the ox gores the cow, or the laws of contracts, or Kedushin. Jewish marriage is only Keser Shtar Bia, the Mishnah tells us. You give something of value, whether it's the ring, whether it's a coin, whether it's any item of value, shtar with a contract, or bia, through cohabitation. Why these? Why only these? These are the methodologies. It only comes about, you only have the result called Kedushin, which is a bonding of the souls, only if you approach it in these specific ways. Because Kesed has a representation in the spiritual. That brings about the bonding of the husband and wife's neshamos. The contract, but it has to be written with witnesses. The witnesses have to meet certain criteria to be qualified to be witnesses. A non-Jew is not a witness. A person who's been disqualified cannot be a witness. A woman cannot be a witness. A slave cannot be a witness. A Canaanite slave. You have to meet certain criteria. The bia, whatever it may be. Because all these are only representations, although they're physical actions, but the physical actions we do, the tefillin, the shape, the square, the black, you have 4 compartments. It has to be made of leather, of a kosher species. All these are representations. So when you study this information, you study physics, you study medicine, whatever you study, that's all physical, that's physical information. The brain, the human intellect, has the capacity to fully grasp that because the brain is finite and the information you're processing is finite information. Torah information, although it's finite in the physical sense, but in terms of its innate value, it's something which is infinite. If we say, Schai b'al naleko, the reward for a mitzvah in this world is many years the world may be. The innate value of one mitzvah, there's not enough time in this existence to reward you for the performance of one mitzvah. So if you study one word of Torah, which is Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, as the Vilna Gaon says, for every word we study Torah, it's a fulfillment of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. Every word is 613 mitzvahs. So if for one mitzvah, you put a coin in the tzedakah box, and you have a mind to do the mitzvah, you cannot be rewarded in this world because there's not enough time or there's not enough value to reward you. So one word of Torah, which is the equivalent of all 613, what's its innate value? It's beyond. So therefore, the Gemara tells us, when you study Torah, to be able to process it and retain it, you have to meet certain criteria. Torah is nibshal l'gimel mashkim, the Gemara says in Tainus. Torah is compared to 3 liquids: water, wine, and milk, and each one has a unique characteristic. One is water flows from an elevated location to a lower location. That's humility. Person that has no humility, you don't come upon the truth of Torah. Wine also has to be pristine. And if it's not, if you keep it even a silver or gold vessel, which has to do with the person's persona, also has to do with humility, the wine sours. Milk, the slightest uncleanliness makes the milk not potable. Drink. It has to be betaira. That represents the purity. You have to meet certain criteria. And the Gemara says in Megillah, Im yogata motzos atamin. If you toil in Torah and you come upon its truth, you can believe that person. Because only then do you merit that siyata d'shmayo, that divine intervention which gives you a grasp, some level of understanding of what you're studying, which is not the case by any other branch of knowledge. Because as I said, Torah is only a representation of the spiritual, which is the infinite. And the human being finite in every sense of the word, including his intellect, doesn't have the capacity to process that information. So you have to meet certain criteria. If you toil until you come upon its truth, you believe that person. Lo yogata umotzosa. If you did not toil and you claim you came upon its truth, you don't believe that person. You may believe you came upon its truth, but you did not. And what about a person says, Yogati v'lo motzosi, I've toiled, I did not come upon its truth. Al tamin. You don't believe that person. He may believe he toiled sufficiently, but he did not. So it's only if you toiled sufficiently, then you merit that divine intervention. There's a famous Moshel from the Alta of Kelm, from Simcha Zissel Zif, who was the most special student of Rabbi Shol Salanter. He explains it. He says there was a contest in medieval times that you'd have to climb a ladder. And the ladder was 180 rungs. And on top of the ladder, you had to reach a platform. And if you were able to reach that level, you won a purse of gold. For centuries, people were trying to climb the ladder. But you realize you climb that ladder, you reach a certain point, the ladder starts swaying, and the level of strength you have to stay on the ladder, not to fall. And if you fall, the person falls to his death. People began the ascent. They reach a certain point. They realized they have to go back down. They're not going to make it. Other people, they pushed themselves. They fell to their death. Finally, a certain person, but there was a prerequisite that before you climbed the ladder, you had to wear a leather belt with a big iron buckle. Nobody understood why. And you wear the belt, you start climbing the ladder. Finally, comes to a point, a certain person climbs the ladder, begins ascending, and this person says, I'm going to give it all I can. Even if I die, fall to my death, I'm going to push myself to the nth degree. He climbs the ladder, and he reaches rung 75, rung 80, but he has another 100 rungs to go. What's he fooling himself? And he's ready, his strength is ebbing, and he's holding 80, 81, and all of a sudden, when he hits rung 81, a magnetic force takes him, brings him straight to the 180th, to the platform on the 180th rung. Meaning the whole idea of wearing that belt, that when you had that iron belt, when the iron came in proximity of that magnet, this magnetic force drew the person all the way to the top. So Reb Simcha Zissel, the Alt of Kelm says, that's the Siyata D'Shmaya. If you toil sufficiently, that's the prerequisite. You have to push yourself to a point. Once you reach that point, automatically, there's divine intervention, and that's when it starts flowing. The information starts flowing, but that's on a divine level. Although you're processing physical information, but that physical information is a representation of the spiritual. So the only way you merit to have that intervention, you have to toil. That's the toil. Similar, that was the Moshel, that was the allegory which he explained it with, the Alt of Kelm. The Gemara in Megillah, in Yogatim Otzoso, if you toil, you come upon its truth, Tamim. The Chazon Ish once said that he's never, one time he came upon a person, but he's never come upon a person, he heard it Dvar Torah from him, which that he spoke the truth. He came upon the truth of Torah. You have to have, every person was a Yorei Shamayim. If he was not a Yorei Shamayim, whatever ingenious as it was, the Chazon Ish learned the Torah entirely in depth, at a level that when you study what he had written, his novelay on it, you had to, even though you've studied recently, you'd have to restudy it just to be able to understand what he's writing, the Chazon Ish. So Chazon Ish says, in all his experience, when he interacted with people who presented Torah concepts to him, there was a prerequisite: the person had to be Yorei Shamayim. He had to fear God. Without the fear of God, regardless of his intellectual capacity, never said that came upon the truth. Except there was one exception, which he was always wondering because he thought the person wasn't there, and one person communicated Torah that he felt was the truth. What do you need truth? What do you need Yorei Shamayim? The answer is because Dov says, Reishis Chochma Yiras Hashem. The Reishis Chochma, the foundation for all Chochma, is Yiras Hashem. That's a prerequisite. Or that's the beginning. If you don't have Yiras Shamayim, you have no relevance. You have no relevance to Torah at all. You have relevance to other things, but not to Torah. Now it's telling us, if you follow my statutes, this is not a rational law. I study to Amelim b'Torah. You have to toil in the Torah. Toil is a statute. We'll discuss this in a minute, why it's a statute. And it has to be Lumod Amnas Lasos. You're studying for the sake of Shmir, for attention, of actualization. Just had a Pirkei Avos. Person studies Amnas Lumod. Hashem allows you to learn. But if you study Amnas Lumod Ulalamed, you're studying to teach others. Hashem gives you the ability to teach others. And if you study Amnas Lumod Ulalamed Velasos and to actualize it, one merits a Siyata D'Shmaya, you're able to carry through all the way to bring it to fruition. But you're studying it. Does make a difference. I study it for studying it. I study it to teach it, or I study it to actualize it. Makes a difference. Because that intent will determine what level siyata shmaya you merit to be able to bring it to a certain point. So you have toil in the study for the sake of retention. Shmira is retention. Lasos, basis mosum is the actualization. That's the understanding. The Chazal tell us, we find that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he came down after 40 days, Hashem says, Lech rei kishichas amcho, descend immediately, because the people have become corrupted. And he comes down and he sees them worshiping the golden calf. He takes the luchos and he smashes them at the foot of the mountain. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him, the luchos asher shibarto, the luchos which you broke, the word asher, so the Gemara Shabbos says, asher shibarto, yashekochacho shibarto. I'm giving you yashekoach, a great thank you that you smashed the luchos. So Chazal tells us, if Moshe wouldn't have broken the luchos, the Jews would have been destroyed. The breaking luchos was the equivalent of an annulment of the relationship between Hashem and the Jewish people. Otherwise, it would have been considered committing adultery under the chuppah. The breaking luchos was an annulment. We needed kapora, but if it wouldn't have been broken, it would have been unforgivable. But Chazal tell us, when Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos, the letters on the luchos were fire. And the Gemara tells us when he broke the luchos, the letters floated heavenward. And what did the letters floating heavenward represent? It represented Shikchas HaTorah. Now the luchos are broken, Torah will be forgotten. Meaning that as much as you study it once, ultimately it's going to start fading. If the Jews would have never sinned with the golden calf, anything we study would have retained and continuously advanced in the depth and breadth of what that is. But now that the luchos were broken, and you're no longer at that original level, as we're going to explain in a moment. So the letters flowing heavenward means we're subject to forgetting. Therefore, we have to continuously review and review and review, and then we go beyond, then we go further. But without reviewing, without toiling, you don't retain it. You have to toil to be able to retain. So the reason why there is Shikchas HaTorah, one forgets, because if one wouldn't forget, you wouldn't toil. So understanding what's at stake, what you have to retain, and what you have to preserve, that's an impetus. If you value what you study, that's an impetus for the person to apply himself even to the point of toiling. And once you toil and you have it, now you go deeper and you go broader on whatever that is. But that's the Chazal. So the Shikchas HaTorah was represented through the letters of the luchos floating heavenward. But the question is why? If luchos wouldn't have been broken, we would have retained it. Now that it's broken, with the same people, in the physical sense, we have intellect. With the same, it's not the same. You've been compromised spiritually. Before the Chet Egel, as the Gemara tells us, in Avodah Zarah, we reverted back to pre-sin of Adam. The impurity of the Eitz Hadas was not within us. As a result of that, our neshamas we were totally pure and spiritual, even though we were physical. Therefore, anything that was absorbed, stayed, was indelibly impressed upon our neshamas. We only kept expanding. But now that we have this impurity of the Chet Egel, which brought us back to post-sin, the Torah cannot stay there unless you continuously infuse it with the Torah. And this is Barasi Eitzer Barasi Torah Tavlin. The Torah is the antidote that suppresses, that negates, that neutralizes the evil of the Eitz Hadas that's within us. And therefore, you need that infusion. Keep infusing it. And it has to be infused with an intent. Lumod Lamid Lishma Velasos, for the sake of retention and for the sake of actualization. That's a prerequisite for the Torah to be impactful and to retain. That's the chok. That's if a person would understand the evil within the Eitz Hadas, how it compromised us, and how it affected us, and why we need certain things. That's the chok. That's the chok aspect. That's the statute aspect of it. Why? What we don't understand, but it's due to that. What happened as a result of Chet Egel or the Chet of Adam Rishon. That's why you have to toil and study with toil for attention, and even to fulfill the mitzvahs. Everything's with toil. That is the prerequisite to be able to impact it spiritually to advance. Go ahead.
If one were to receive a bracha of siyata dishmaya, so how should we understand what is the methodology of benefiting from that bracha?
Gemara says, in just having Daf Yomi, Sochas Apolim, that if you have 3 generations of Talmidei Chachomim, it's guaranteed Torah will return to that family. Why? Because it says Lo Yemusha Bizaracho Bizerzacho Bipicho Pizarcho Bizerzacho. It says 3 generations. Torah will not be removed from Bipicho, from your mouth, Bipizerach Pizaracho Pizerzacho, from the mouths of your children and your grandchildren.
Every day.
What? Well, that was supposed to be
every day.
Correct. So from there it says, we see Torah's Machzer Achsan Yishalom. Torah will always come back to its abode, will always come back to that family. So I heard this from Rav Shalom Shradron, Zeh Tzadok Levrocha, going back at least 55 years ago. He was in Baltimore. So he asked the question, but we see many families, you have 3 generations of Talmidei Chachomim, Torah doesn't come back. People have become irreligious. They're totally ignorant. Where's the Torah? He says, when the Torah comes back, if somebody knocks on your door, and he gave a mashal, and he was the Magri Yerushalayim, Rav Shalom Shadron, and he knew exactly how to deliver it. And he said, person wants an appointment with the king, and it's almost impossible to have an audience with the king. But he knows one of the ministers, and he arranges his appointment. And the king says, when the person comes, he should come at a certain hour, and he has to be there to the minute. And when he knocks on the door, there's a certain code. And he taps the code on the door, I'll open the door. Okay? So what happens? The king understands this person's coming at a certain designated moment, and he's waiting for the knock. And exactly at that moment, that knock with the code is on the door. The king opens the door. All of a sudden, he sees the person running the opposite direction. And he knocks and he runs away. So the king is down the kapschus, gives him the benefit that he says maybe an emergency came up and he had to flee. Okay. Next day comes, again he knocks. The exact same moment. The king opens up the door again. Again, he sees the person runs. Okay. So the king says, this is it. My time is so precious, I'm not going to waste my time. This happens one more time, I will never give the man the audience. Comes the 3rd day, it repeats itself. King says, it's over. Doesn't make any sense. Here, he's gone through every length to get the audience. And he knocks, and then he runs the other way. I'm not going to waste my time. So he said, every day in Ava Rabo, that's the bracha we say before Kriya Shema. We say, Avinu Avarachman, Rachim, V'seibeli Beinu, Lahavin, Lahaskil, Lishmod, Liban, Lamed, Lishmod, Velasos. Every day we make that request. Give us the capacity to understand, to study, to fulfill. And the moment we leave shul, it's like we're running in the opposite direction. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be tomorrow, knock on your door again. And every day repeats itself. And how much time are you investing in that request? Here you're asking, Hashem's willing to give it. And where are you? I got a meeting. I got to be out of here before votes here. Okay, so if that's the case, are you sincere? You're not sincere. You're knocking on Hashem's door and then you're running the other way. That's what he said. So he said, the Torah is there. You know what you got to do? You got to open the door. That's called Bechira. Once you have 3 generations Talmidei Chachomim, it's there. It's for the taking, but you have to let it in. So if you choose to let it in, it's available because you have 3 generations of Talmidei Chachomim. That's the understanding. So the same thing when I'm telling a person that gets a bracha, siyata d'shmaya. You have it, but you have to act on it. If you don't act on it, it's waiting for you, but you have to partake of it. That writes in one of his svarim, Kisvei Chofetz Chaim, people, everybody's looking for a schooler, some kind of do something to merit certain bracha, whatever it is. People have illnesses, people have problem with children, people, whatever it is, financial, and they'll travel to every length of the world to bring about a resolution to that problem. He says the greatest bracha emanates from the study of Torah. The Torah itself is the bracha. If a person would involve himself and immerse himself sufficiently, he's not minimizing a schooler, but he says you have the school at hand. The school is called study of Torah. Study it with the right intent and commit yourself. If that you don't see a change, study more, pray, and then go for a schooler. But right away, we're running for a schooler. Get the bracha from the rabbi. But the question is, when you put on your tefillin, do you put them on properly? Do you speak? Is your mind? You're looking at your cell phone. You look at your watch. Do you have to be out of there? Okay. First attend to all those other things. Then we'll talk about traveling to, you're going to go to Uman or you're going to go to whatever you want to call. That's the Chofetz Chaim. His father was an idolater. Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda was a tzaddik. He was such a tzaddik, Hashem considered that he should be Mashiach. But what did he do? What he did was, when he became king, he gave the Jews an ultimatum. He gathered all the Jewish people and he said to them, he had a Sefer Torah and he had a sword. And he said, giving you a choice. Either live by the Torah or you can be pierced by the sword. No nonsense. That's the ultimatum he gave them. So the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, in Chelek, the last chapter, that within 2.5 years, every woman and child in Eretz Yisrael were proficient in Hilchos Tumah V'Tayra, the laws pertaining to spiritual purity. The women and children, so you can imagine what the men. Why? Because they left the oil burning late. They studied unceasingly to the point that the Jewish people were so committed to Torah, they let the grapes rot on the vine. Because they felt it's being penny wise and pound foolish to be distracted, to bring in harvest. You don't need it. Hashem will provide. So what happens? Sancheiriv comes with millions of troops to destroy Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash. And Hashem says, should I have Chizkiyahu going to battle with him and meriting the miracle? And I should distract him from his Torah studies? Oh, no. While he's studying, not being distracted, I'll have Gabriel, the Malach Adin. He's the one who destroyed Sodom and Amorah. I'll tell him one swoop just to wipe them out. He says, I'm sure Chizkiyahu wouldn't want to be distracted from his Torah studies. I'll do it. Because that's what he would prefer. And that's the Machneh Sancheiriv. They wiped out. In one swoop. Midnight came, Gabriel wiped them out. They were all incinerated. All of a sudden, next day, the report comes back to Chizkiyahu. There's wealth, unlimited wealth strewn all over Eretz Yisrael. All the troops died, their horses, their donkeys. They came with tremendous wealth with them, the soldiers. It was wealth, they were drowning in wealth. Here they did pick the grapes off the vine, they let it rot. Hashem says, you do yours, I'll do mine. And the wealth was enormous wealth. But you have all this financial opportunity. I know where the success lies. Hashem says, I'll bring it to you on a platinum platter, not a silver platter. And he did. So afterwards, Chizkiyahu Melech Yehuda was concerned. Maybe it's a question of Gzela. It's not his, he has no right to take it. First it was all stolen. It says Sancheiriv conquered the world. So much of the wealth was what he plundered and what he took. Hashem says they don't have to worry about it. This is the spoils of war. You have a right to it. It's a gift. It's my gift to you. That's what it is. You toil in my Torah. You're not distracted. Whatever it is, the rain will come, as we'll see in a moment. The earth, the land will give its bounty, and so on and forth. The bounty will be beyond your imagination, and so on and so forth. But you have to meet the criteria of what the prerequisite is: toiling. Toiling to retain, toiling to study, to be able to actualize the mitzvah. And once you do that, you have the siyata shmaya to carry it all the way through.
Rabbi,
Good.
why is it that it's talking about spiritual pursuits, but all the blessings are material? You would think that if it was a spiritual pursuit, that the bracha would be spiritual brachas.
It's understood. Spiritual brachas, you don't know. What's a spiritual bracha? Olam haba, we know Olam haba is something which is infinite. We have no realms to even understand what that is. The Navi says, Olam haba is ayin lo rosa elokim lo secha. No human eye ever saw what it is. Only God knows what that is. Until you arrive there, you have no inkling. We're physical beings. How could a physical being relate to something which is totally spiritual? So we speak about the material, ein kemach, ein Torah. Right? You can do a lot with wealth. I always tell over the Chofetz Chaim, I mentioned to you, but it's worthwhile remembering the story with the Parvich Rav and Rebbe Chana Wasserman. They wanted to borrow a sefer that was mentioned in Ber Alocha, and they come to the Chofetz Chaim about 3 a.m. The Chofetz Chaim says, that sefer I haven't seen for, I don't know, for 60 years, 70 years. Because he says the majority of what I had written was from memory. And then he looks at his bookshelf, and there are only a few svarim. He didn't have a large library. And then he groans and moans when he looks at the svarim. And he explained why. He says, you know why I'm groaning and moaning? Because I had to earn money to purchase those svarim. And he says, in America, they say money is time. Money is time. He says, no, time is money. You have to expend time to earn money. And therefore, if I wouldn't have to buy these svarim, I would have invested in learning. But because I had no choice, therefore I had to expend the time to earn the money to purchase those svarim. That's if you have time, you have it all. If you don't have the money, you have to expend time, which is invaluable for the sake of money. That's what it's about. So if you can invest your life totally in Torah and toil, and Hashem provides it, you don't have to expend what's invaluable for something which is finite. Hashem will provide the finite, and that's Kosai. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow with the Chumash. We'll do Sida Allah.